In this video, we're going to take a look at how to draw with oil pastels, and we're going to do a demonstration of a pear here. So first thing we need to do is draw the basic shape of the pear. I'm going to draw very loosely here, drawing mostly with my shoulder instead of drawing with my wrist. With oil pastels, they're very similar to the processes that you might use with colored pencils. You're going to build up colors on the surface. So the first thing we want to do is kind of fill in the local color, and most of the pear here is going to be a yellow-green color. So I'm going to start by just lightly and loosely filling in the yellow-green. I'm not covering up the entire surface of the paper here either. Next, I'm going to start to build in the shadows, and we're going to just layer those in. So going back to what I mentioned about colored pencils, with colored pencils you kind of want to either create an underpainting or layer the local color. And with oil pastels, we're going to do kind of a combination of the two. We're going to be layering a lot of the local color, or the observed colors that we see, but we're also in the process going to be creating somewhat of an underpainting. That's what you see here. We started with the local color, and now we're layering in some of the shadowed areas. Our light source is coming from the upper left-hand side. That's why most of the shadows are existing on the right side of the pear. We're also going to pick up on observed colors that we see and add them as soon as possible. This pear that I'm looking at here has a little bit of red here and there, so I'm going to go ahead and add that. There's also a little bit of yellow ochre in the pear as well, so I'm going to start layering that on the surface too. With oil pastels, they're going to start very much like crayons, and then the more that you layer, the more they're going to become more like paint. They're almost a mixture between crayons and paint. Unlike soft pastels, you can't really layer a whole lot over the top of the oil pastels. Eventually, the binder will start to move around and you'll be moving the pigment on the surface instead of actually layering more color. So with soft pastels, you don't really run into that issue, so it's a little bit different. Alright, we're going to just continue to layer the local color, and in this case I'm going to take a brighter, more intense yellow-green, and I'm going to layer right on top of some of the undertones that exist already on the pear. And what's going to happen is, similar to colored pencils, we're going to start to burnish almost the colors underneath, and they're going to start to slowly mix. At this stage in the drawing, the oil pastel material is becoming very much like paint, which is going to cause some of the layers that you put on top to mix with some of the colors underneath, which in this case is going to lead to a more natural looking pear. But it doesn't really matter what subject matter you're doing, there should be lots of layers of color. And speaking of layering, here we are layering the shadows again. With oil pastels, it's going to be very important to layer lots and lots of applications of color on the surface. The more layers of color that you put, the more depth that you're going to see in the final image. Now, once we've got the shadows established and we've put a couple areas of detail on the pear here and there, we're going to start to establish the highlights and make those a bit stronger. Here I'm using a cream oil pastel, and I'm going right on top of what I've already established, and we're just going to lighten up some of those colors and help further establish the light source coming from the left side. In the process, we're also going to define the form a bit more as well. Now, to make the highlight more intense in areas, we're going to use white. And as we start to make these marks on the surface, we can start to define a little bit of the texture that happens on the pear, because at this point the oil pastels are very thick on the surface and easily moved around on the surface as well. Any colors that you see in your reference, whether that be a live reference or a photo reference, don't be afraid to add those, even if they're subtle colors. Now, the colors that we have on our surface here are a bit dull, so what we're going to do is intensify the midtones here. We're going to do this with a bright yellow-green. So just to the right of our highlighted area and just to the left of our shadowed area, we're going to start to use that yellow-green to just bring out some of the original green of the pear, and that's going to actually help create the illusion of form a bit. We use a dark brown to add the stem, And then we're going to clean up the edges here when we add our background. The background's going to help us to define the edges. So we've got really loose with our marks early in the drawing, and now that we're adding the background, we can kind of define the edges of that pear. I'm going to let my background be a bit darker at the top and fade to a lighter value down at the bottom. So like we did with the pear, we're going to layer colors here in the background as well, starting with the darker values, and then I'm going to make the background red because it's going to contrast nicely with the green pear, and so I'm going to start layering that red right on top of that dark brown. And of course some of that dark brown will show through underneath, affecting the value of the red. Now I'm going to go back with the dark brown and make the upper portion a bit darker in value. And I'm also going to take a white at the bottom and make that area a little bit lighter in value. I'm going to leave a little bit of space behind the pear for a cast shadow. Then I'll take some of that dark brown and just darken up that area of cast shadow right around the pear. That's going to help further the illusion of the light source coming from the left side. And then I'll take that red that we used originally to cover up the underpainting. Just smooth out those transitions between the lighter reds and the darker reds at the top. And the last thing we can do is brush away any stray pieces of oil pastel, and there's a quick look at how to use oil pastels.